I told you, you are trespassing. Get off my property now.
You can't tell me what to do. I'm going in whether you like it or not.
My name is Marcus Thompson, and I just bought 50 acres of Tennessee land specifically to end an 8-year war with the most entitled woman I have ever met. Right now, I'm watching Delilah Yates have an absolute meltdown at my brand new, industrial-grade steel gate. Her luxury SUV is trapped behind what I affectionately call $250,000 worth of screw you. And the look on her face is worth every single penny. You see, for 8 years, Delilah, the self-appointed queen of the Oak Haven Hills Homeowners Association, treated my land like her personal shortcut to the country club. 8 years of criminal trespass. But the real spark, the thing that ignited this whole magnificent bonfire, was paint. When I finally fenced in my little vegetable garden, she hit me with a $500 HOA fine for using the wrong shade of white. Arctic snow wasn't acceptable, she declared. Only cloud puff met her standards. I swear to you, those were the actual names she cited. That's when she made her fatal mistake. She assumed that a retired civil engineer wouldn't know how to fight back. What she didn't know was that I'd been waiting 40 years for someone arrogant enough to pick a legal fight with me. That horn from her SUV? It just hit the 4-minute mark. That's dedication. But here's the best part. She can honk until the actual heat death of the universe, and this gate will never open for her again. Because I discovered something in the county records that doesn't just prove she's been trespassing. It's about to end her entire suburban dictatorship. Let me take you back 3 months, to when I thought retirement meant choosing between golf and fishing instead of waging legal warfare. I'd just bought my dream property, 15 acres of rolling hills. After 40 years of designing municipal water systems and reading construction codes until my eyes bled, this was supposed to be my peaceful retreat. I should have known better than to expect quiet when there's an HOA president within a 20-meter radius. Delilah showed up on my third Tuesday morning. A silver SUV crunched across my driveway, and out stepped a woman who looked like she'd been manufactured in a suburban mom factory. Perfect highlights, athleisure that cost more than my mortgage, and a smile that immediately made you check your wallet. She introduced herself as the HOA president and immediately started talking about concerns about my fence. Red flag number 1. My property isn't in Oak Haven Hills, and never has been. My 15 acres predates their development by over a decade. She insisted my simple chain-link fence wasn't in compliance with community standards and was apparently affecting everyone's property values in ways that would make Adam Smith weep. I made the mistake of saying I'd look into it. 2 weeks later, the violation notice arrived. A $500 fine, plus $50 daily until I replaced my fence with some ridiculous vinyl monstrosity. When I called to explain that her HOA had zero authority over my land, Delilah's voice turned instant ice. She insisted every property in the area fell under their jurisdiction and offered to come over with their surveyor to clear up my obvious confusion. Like an idiot, I agreed. The next morning, she arrived with a nervous-looking man, and 2 hours later, Delilah announced that while my house was outside their boundary, my fence was actually on property that fell under HOA jurisdiction. When I asked to see the miraculous survey proving this, she couldn't produce any documentation, just kept insisting their professional analysis proved jurisdiction. That night, the engineer in me took over. When someone tries to snow you with technical nonsense that doesn't pass the smell test, you go to the source. I drove to the county records office. The office smelled like old paper, but to me, it smelled like Christmas morning. I started with my 1987 deed. My land was clean, clear, and completely independent. Then I pulled the Oak Haven Hills development records from 2002. Their boundaries stopped exactly at my property line. But then I found it, the legal dynamite. Buried in their construction plans was a document. Temporary construction easement. Thompson property, access route for Phase 2. Dated March 2003, with a clear expiration date of 18 months maximum. Development Phase 2 was completed in December 2004. That easement had been dead and buried for 20 years. 20 years of Delilah driving through my property every single morning, committing criminal trespass while lecturing me about compliance. The irony was so beautiful, I actually started laughing out loud in the quiet office. I kept digging, and I found the real masterpiece. Tucked away in the Oak Haven Hills HOA Charter itself, Article 7, Section 3, written by their own lawyers. It stated that any violation of easement agreements or trespass upon non-member property shall result in immediate removal of board members and potential dissolution of the association's legal standing. Delilah had been violating her own HOA's founding charter for 8 years, and she had no idea the legal nuclear option I held. But as I drove home, I saw fresh tire tracks cutting across my back pasture. She had trespassed again while I was at the courthouse. That's when the engineer in me took over from the angry property owner. Calling the sheriff would solve the immediate problem, but it wouldn't stop Delilah from finding new victims. People like her only learn from a permanent, total shutdown. What I needed wasn't just a fence, I needed a strategy. That's when I remembered the for sale sign on County Road 847. 50 acres of prime undeveloped land sitting right against my eastern boundary, controlling every back road and shortcut between the subdivision and civilization. The price was $200,000, way outside any reasonable retirement budget. But I wasn't thinking about reasonable anymore. I was thinking about the most expensive chess move in Tennessee history. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number on the sign. I needed complete tactical superiority. 2 hours later, I was standing on a hilltop, looking at the Hartwell property. It wrapped around Oak Haven Hills like a military noose, controlling the exact route Delilah had been using for her 8-year crime spree. I told the stunned realtor, "I'll take it." The paperwork was signed, transferring a huge chunk of my retirement savings into what was essentially the world's most expensive legal barricade. I spent the next week throwing money at contractors. I got 8-foot chain link, barbed wire, industrial locks, and motion sensor cameras that would make the Pentagon jealous. My retirement was being spent on the most satisfying property rights enforcement project in American legal history. Friday morning, my phone buzzed with a text from Delilah. "Mr. Thompson, your fence violations have escalated. Meet me at your property line tomorrow at 8 a.m. sharp. This situation ends now, one way or another." I showed the text to my attorney, Sarah Kai. I explained that it wasn't a threat. It was a formal invitation to watch someone walk directly into the most expensive trap in Tennessee history. Saturday morning, 7:55 a.m. sharp. I was standing at my property line with a thermos of coffee and 21 pages of legal ammunition. Delilah's SUV approached. Out stepped our suburban dictator in her full battle regalia. Power blazer, designer heels, and a leather briefcase. Behind her emerged a nervous surveyor. I felt genuinely sorry for the poor bastard. She stopped exactly 6 feet into my property and announced we were finally going to resolve this fence situation, like civilized adults who understood how community standards worked. I took a slow sip of coffee and casually mentioned that she was currently committing criminal trespass by standing on my private property. Her composure cracked. She launched into a prepared speech about me maliciously interfering with established traffic patterns that benefited the neighborhood. When I asked her to clarify what she meant, she actually said it out loud. Responsible residents had been using the convenient access route through my back property for years. I pulled out my phone and started recording, asking her to confirm on camera that she was specifically referring to the route that crossed my private property without any legal easement or documented permission. That's when she opened her briefcase and produced her folder. 15 pages of the most impressively manufactured legal fiction I'd ever encountered, titled Legal Analysis of Property Access Rights, citing adverse possession and prescriptive easement doctrine. It would have been genuinely intimidating to anyone who hadn't spent the previous week learning what actual property law looked like. I flipped through their analysis while explaining that they seemed to have overlooked something rather important. When she demanded to know what it was, I pulled out my own folder and the original expired temporary construction easement from March 2003. The easement has been officially dead and buried for exactly 20 years, Delilah, I said, reading directly from the official document. Which means every single use of this route since then constitutes criminal trespassing under Tennessee Code. You absolutely cannot establish legal right to use someone else's land based on consistently breaking the law for 20 years. Her face went through 6 shades of red. Her surveyor suddenly stopped setting up his expensive equipment. She tried arguing that property law was flexible. I patiently explained that's not how easements work. She escalated by calling the county planning department right there in front of me, filing an official complaint about illegal obstruction. I just stood there, sipping my coffee, waiting for them to patiently explain to her that no such public access route existed. She hung up, looking like her entire worldview was built on complete legal nonsense. Her surveyor packed up and drove away, explaining to Delilah that creating documentation for a prescriptive easement claim would constitute criminal fraud. That's when I detonated the nuclear bomb. I told her that since she was so interested in property boundaries, she might want to know that I'd successfully closed on the 50-acre Hartwell property yesterday afternoon. Monday morning arrived like the opening scene of a war movie. I watched from my kitchen window as 3 different contractor trucks rolled up to begin what became known as the Great Fence Project of 2025. 8-foot chain link, motion sensors, signs visible from low Earth orbit, the precision of a military campaign. Delilah made her first tactical error by driving up, demanding to speak with the foreman, and calling every regulatory agency in Tennessee. She discovered I'd filed every required permit and met every code requirement. Over the next few days, her desperation escalated. Tuesday, she trespassed on my original 15 acres, trying a new route, which led me to extend the fence, creating one continuous 55-acre fortress. Wednesday, she arrived with a different surveyor and fabricated documents claiming boundary errors. He quickly apologized and left. Thursday brought the meltdown. She showed up with bolt cutters and started attempting to remove sections of my fence. The foreman called the sheriff's department while I stood there documenting everything with my phone, creating a beautiful video record of Tennessee's most entitled woman committing criminal property damage in broad daylight. Deputy Rodriguez arrived and explained that destroying someone else's fence was criminal mischief. Friday morning brought the grand finale. Delilah arrived with a moving truck and 2-day laborers, attempting to physically relocate sections of my fence. I called my attorney, Sarah Kai. Sarah arrived, took one look, and started laughing so hard she needed medical attention. Within 20 minutes, Sarah had documented everything and explained to the hired muscle that they were committing felony destruction of property on camera. They dropped their tools and disappeared. Sarah introduced herself as my legal counsel and politely suggested Delilah contact her own attorney before continuing her property destruction project. Delilah, in turn, threatened federal lawsuits. That's when Sarah pulled out her phone and made the final call. She contacted Rita Walsh, an investigative journalist specializing in HOA abuse. Rita said she'd be there in 2 hours with a camera crew. The news story that aired Sunday evening. HOA president accused of chronic trespassing and property damage was a masterpiece. It opened floodgates of complaints about financial irregularities and selective enforcement. By Tuesday, the Tennessee State HOA Oversight Commission launched a formal investigation. The investigation uncovered financial irregularities totaling over $400,000, including contractor kickbacks and insurance fraud. The real bombshell was that Delilah had been using her position to manipulate property assessments for tax purposes, engaging in systematic tax fraud that had been stealing money from county schools for years. The State Commission issued an emergency suspension of the HOA's legal standing. All violation notices, including my ridiculous fence color fine, were legally invalid, and all collected fines were to be refunded. Wednesday morning, exactly 1 week after Delilah tried to destroy my fence, I was watching Channel 7 News report that Tennessee's most infamous HOA president had been arrested at her home and charged with embezzlement, fraud, and racketeering under state organized crime statutes. Saturday afternoon, I attended the mandatory community meeting where the state receiver announced the findings. Every resident in that room went silent as the numbers climbed. The final component of the state's corrective action plan was read. All property violations issued by the previous board were officially canceled. My legal fees would be reimbursed. Delilah's entire campaign of harassment was transformed into a criminal case that would follow her for the rest of her life. 6 months later, I was standing on that hilltop. The industrial fence was still there, but what had grown up around it was a positive outcome. The new HOA board approached me with a proposal. They wanted to lease a small portion of my 50 acres for a legally documented community emergency access route. I agreed, but with one additional condition. Instead of monthly lease payments, I wanted the HOA to establish a scholarship fund for local high school students pursuing engineering or law degrees. The money saved would create educational opportunities that would outlast all of us. The land was transformed. 20 acres became a certified wildlife preserve. 15 acres were designated for community gardens. The remaining 5 acres, strategically positioned, stayed exactly as they were: industrial fencing and security monitoring, serving as a permanent reminder that property rights in America are not suggestions to be ignored. 1 year later, I'm sitting on my back porch, watching kids from the environmental education program learning about wildlife conservation, where Delilah Kramer used to commit her daily crimes. Justice required patience, substantial financial investment, and a willingness to fight. But the results transformed the entire community. Have you ever dealt with an HOA president who thought authority meant immunity from law? Drop a comment about handling entitled neighbors who confused community leadership with personal ownership of other people's property. Sometimes the best stories come from ordinary people who refuse to let bureaucrats steal their rights.